In the 1970s, a single phone call could decide your whole future. If you were Black, you were not just asking someone out, you were passing an unspoken test that every family in the neighborhood helped to write. Magazines like Ebony declared character mattered more than looks, scrutinizing every date as a step toward respectability. So why have these 25 rules vanished? The answers reveal what we have lost and what we might want back. Flip open an Ebony magazine from the spring of 1972, and it reads less like a glossy and more like a manual for living right. The April issue, tucked between ads for Afro, Sheen, and Cadillac, carried a headline that did not mince words: how to know if he's ready for marriage. Advice columns ran under banners like Heart to Heart or Advice for the Lovelorn, but the message was always the same. Dating wasn't a game, it was a proving ground. Editors at Johnson Publishing chose their words with care, answering letters from anxious readers who wanted to know if a man's job, church attendance, or family background made him a safe bet. One pull quote from a 1972 column reads, "A good man is steady, honest, and brings you home before midnight." The magazine didn't just answer questions, it set the questions. Is he a provider? Is she a lady? Does he respect your mother? The editors saw themselves as gatekeepers, shaping the very standards of Black respectability. Their intent went beyond romance. These pages were blueprints for building strong families and, by extension, strong communities. In the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, with so much at stake, every date carried the weight of the future. Ebony's advice steered readers away from playboys and fast girls, urging young people to look for partners who could weather hard times and bring pride to the family name. Readers took these lessons to heart. Letters poured in from Detroit, Atlanta, and Los Angeles, each one echoing the same concern: how do I know he's not just looking for fun? The answers were unwavering. Watch how he treats his elders, notice if he keeps his word, see if he stands by you when things get rough. The magazine's editorial line was clear: looks might turn heads, but character built households. Johnson Publishing's advice wasn't just for the individual, it was for the whole community, a kind of unwritten contract that tied personal choices to collective progress. In Black households across the country, these magazines sat on coffee tables and nightstands, their pages dog-eared and underlined. Mothers clipped columns and tucked them into Bibles. Fathers quoted headlines at the dinner table. The advice didn't stay on the page. It shaped conversations, expectations, and the very rituals of courtship. If you wanted to know the rules, Ebony and Jet didn't just reflect them, they wrote them. A stack of advice columns could tell you what mattered, but the numbers made it plain. In the early 1970s, when researchers asked Black college students what they wanted in a partner, the answers did not start with looks. They started with character. Surveys and campus polls from the era show a clear pattern. Honesty, reliability, and moral standing topped the list, while physical appearance trailed behind. In classrooms from Howard to Morehouse, students debated what it meant to be marriage material. The consensus: a fine face might open the door, but it was moral fitness that got you a seat at the table. One sociological study from the period summed up the mood. Among Black undergraduates, traits like trustworthiness and religious commitment were rated as essential for a long-term relationship. When asked to rank qualities, a strong majority placed values and responsibility above surface attraction. The message echoed through student unions and dorm rooms. If you could not be counted on, you were not counted in. College newspapers and Black student organizations picked up the theme. Editorials warned against fast talkers and pretty boys who had nothing to offer but a smile. Letters to the editor asked, does he go to church? Does she keep her word? These were not rhetorical questions. They were the checkboxes of the day. Campus events like soulmate seminars and marriage forums drew crowds eager to talk about what made a relationship last. The answer, time and again, was character. Even in the pages of Ebony and Jet, polls and reader letters hammered the point home. A young woman from Atlanta wrote, "I am not looking for a man who just looks good in a suit. I want someone who stands for something." A Detroit student answered, "My mother says a pretty face cannot pay the bills or pray for you when you are sick." This was not just talk. The numbers and the voices behind them set the standard for dating in Black communities. Respect, responsibility, and reputation were not optional. They were the foundation. If you wanted to be seen as a serious prospect, you had to prove you were more than a good time. You had to show you were good people. Church basements and fellowship halls in cities like Detroit and Philadelphia buzzed every week with the sound of youth choir rehearsals. But these were not just about hitting the right note, they were prime time for catching someone's eye, always under the careful watch of the church mothers. The bulletin board in the vestibule listed rehearsal dates in bold: Wednesday at 6:30, Saturday at noon. Yet, for every soprano and tenor trying to focus on the music, there was a silent game of glances and smiles happening in the back row. In Detroit, church programs from the early 1970s show entire pages dedicated to youth activities, with reminders about proper conduct printed right beneath the list of hymns. In Philadelphia, senior women's boards kept handwritten notes on which young folks seemed too friendly during break time. If a boy lingered too long at the punch bowl with a girl, a church mother would clear her throat, and suddenly everyone remembered why they were there. One elder from Mount Zion Baptist still recalls that they sat a girl down for hugging a boy behind the choir loft. That was not going to fly. For teenagers, choir rehearsal was a rare chance to mingle without a parent attached at the hip. But freedom came with limits. The church mothers had eyes everywhere. They could spot a note past 3 pews over. They knew who was holding hands under the hymnals and who was sneaking out to the parking lot. The first spark of romance had to survive the gauntlet of raised eyebrows and whispered warnings. In this world, every conversation was public, every move observed. If you wanted to get to know someone, you learned to speak in code, to flirt with a glance, and to plan your next move carefully. The real challenge began once rehearsal ended, and you had to figure out how to keep the conversation going beyond the church doors. In Baltimore, the Enoch Pratt Free Library holds a box of letters that tell a different kind of love story, one that unfolds slowly, with each envelope carrying the weight of hope and patience. In the early 1970s, a young couple traded 42 handwritten letters just to arrange a single weekend visit. The first letter opened with a simple greeting, but by the third, they were swapping stories about work, church, and the weather. Each reply took days to arrive, stamped with postmarks that mapped a journey across the city. Every question, "Will your mother be home?" or "Should I bring my Sunday shoes?" waited for an answer that might not come until next week. One note dated March 12th reads, "I promise I will be there by noon if the bus runs on time. Tell your father I will bring the sweet rolls." Another letter sent back 2 days later reads, "Mama says you can come, but only if you promise to sit in the parlor. She will be listening." For this Baltimore couple, the mailbox became a kind of finish line. Each letter was a test of commitment, a sign you were willing to wait, to wonder, to work for something real. The pace was slow, the anticipation thick. When the 42nd letter finally confirmed the visit, it was not just a date, it was a victory. In a world before instant messages and quick calls, love had to be built by hand, one page at a time. The mailbox was a stage for longing, and every reply was a small act of faith that the wait would be worth it. But even the most patient hearts eventually needed a faster way to connect. The letter writing ritual gave way to the next challenge, picking up the phone, where privacy was a luxury and courage was always on the line. Rotary phones weren't just a prop, they were a test. In plenty of Black households, you didn't call a girl, you called her family, her siblings, and sometimes the lady upstairs who shared your party line. In neighborhoods where money was tight or buildings were old, party lines were still hanging on. You would pick up the receiver, heart pounding, only to hear Mrs. Jenkins 2 floors up talking about her gout. That meant you had to hang up and wait your turn, all the while hoping she would finish before your courage ran out. Even when you had a private line, privacy was a myth. The hallway phone sat right in the middle of everything. Mama was in the kitchen, Daddy in the living room, and little cousins running up and down the stairs. Every word you said traveled through the house. You learned to keep it short and sweet because tying up the line was a family offense. No one wanted to hear, "Get off that phone, boy. Somebody might be trying to call about a job." Etiquette wasn't just about what you said, but when you said it. Bell system brochures and old etiquette manuals agreed, never call after 9 p.m. unless you wanted to start a scandal. A late night call suggested things better left unsaid. And you didn't call at the last minute either. Respectable boys picked up the phone by midweek, Wednesday at the latest, to ask for a Saturday date. That showed you had a plan and that you respected her time and her parents' trust. Every call was a performance with an audience you couldn't see, and one wrong note could echo all over the block. A car idling at the curb was not a date. It was a declaration of disrespect. In the 1970s, if you wanted to take someone's daughter out, you did not honk the horn. That was the unwritten law, and everybody knew it. Mothers in Memphis, fathers in Chicago, even the neighbor peeking through the blinds, they all agreed. Honking meant you were too lazy or too scared to face the front door, and that alone could end the night before it began. Local papers in Baltimore ran stories about fathers grabbing bats, or, in one case, a garden hoe when some boy thought a quick beep would do the job. The message was clear: if you wanted a date, you had to park the car, walk up the path, and ring the bell, no matter how much your hand shook. The front door was not just an entrance, it was a checkpoint. On the other side stood the father, sometimes arms crossed, sometimes polishing his shoes, always sizing you up. You might get a handshake, you might get a stare, but you were going to answer a question or two before she ever appeared. The whole ritual was a test of backbone and respect. And when the night was over, you did not just drop her off and peel away. You walked her to the porch, careful not to linger too long. 'Cause in Black neighborhoods, from Philly to Little Rock, the porch light was more than a bulb, it was a curfew. If that light flickered, it meant time was up. Some families even had a system: 1 blink for wrap it up, 2 for get your behind in this house. No matter how smooth you thought you were, the rules were set in stone. Honk, and you might get a door slammed in your face. Ignore the porch light, and you better hope you could run fast. The front door gauntlet made sure that respect came before romance, and that every date started and ended on the right note. Mothers in Memphis didn't just wave goodbye from the porch. They lined up at the door, eyes sharp as razors, ready to inspect every detail before a girl left for her date. Hem too high, back upstairs, collar wrinkled, iron it again. There is an old story about Mrs. Glover on Beale Street. She kept a tape measure in her apron and was not shy about using it. If your skirt did not pass, neither did you. These were not just fashion checks, they were lessons in self-respect, and a warning to the young men waiting outside. You were not taking out just anybody. Appearance was only half the test. Timekeeping mattered just as much. In North Philly, being late for a date was not a minor slip. It was grounds for a locked door. Oral histories from the city tell of mothers who set kitchen timers when a suitor was due. If the bell rang and he hadn't arrived, the night was over before it began. A 1971 Ebony poll found that 84% of readers saw lateness as a sign of disrespect. That meant showing up early, shoes shine, nerves steady. No one joked about CP time when it came to dating. You could be late to the cookout, maybe even to church, but not to a front door. Reliability started at the threshold. If you could not keep time, how could you be trusted with someone's heart or their future? The inspection line and the ticking clock worked together. Only those who passed both got a chance to prove they were worth spending money on, or even sharing a meal. In these homes, respect started before you ever left the house. In Harlem, a folded flyer from 1974 promised more than just etiquette. It promised survival. The Urban League's youth workshops taught young men how to budget for a steak dinner at Sylvia's, even if their pockets were thin. The lesson plan was simple. Write down your paycheck, subtract rent, groceries, and bus fare, then see if you had enough left for a proper date. If you couldn't afford the meal, you weren't ready to ask anyone out. This wasn't just about food, it was about proving you could provide, even when factories were closing and job ads dried up. But money wasn't the only test. The real economy ran through the beauty shop. Mrs. Johnson, who ran chairs on 135th Street, kept tabs on every romance in a 3-block radius. She would lean in close to a customer and say, "Child, I saw him at the Red Rooster with somebody else last Saturday." Gossip was currency, and one bad report could sink your reputation faster than a bounce check. If you were seen taking shortcuts, splitting the bill, showing up empty-handed, or skipping the front door, the news would reach your date's mother before you even got her home. Not everyone agreed with the rules. By 1977, the Combahee River Collective was meeting in Boston, writing statements that called out double standards. Why should women's hemlines be policed while men's paychecks set the terms of respect? On college campuses, Black women's groups started to question why they had to pass inspection lines just to go out, or why a man's ability to buy a steak should decide his worth. The old rules promised protection, but sometimes they felt like a cage. As the decade wore on, more voices began to push back, asking if respect had to mean restriction and who really benefited from the rules everyone was supposed to follow. Today, dating moves fast, often too fast for real roots to grow. With fewer shared rituals and less community oversight, connection can feel disposable. But the longing for mutual respect and genuine intention remains. As relationships reshape in the digital age, the question is not what rules we've lost, but what values we are willing to reclaim. Tell us, what matters most to you now?